Welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn. I am your host, Michael Grace, and today I am joined by David McBee. David is an author, a trainer, and a professional speaker. He works with sales representatives and business owners around the world, teaching and creating curriculum about the intricacies of internet marketing. Considered an expert in his field, David is known for his passion, sense of humor, and talent for making the complicated simple. Born and raised in the suburbs of Kansas City, this Eagle Scout earned a BFA, which is a Bachelor's in Fine Arts. For those of you that don't know what a BFA is, in theater from Avila University.
Avila,
okay, yeah. Thank you.
Good guess.
Spent his 20s as a salesperson and entrepreneur. Though David found success in both, he preferred the personal development side of business and switched his focus to training. Helping others become their best selves is what led him to write Everyday Lessons Every Day. David's humble hope is to enhance his readers' lives emotionally and spiritually with his honest look into his journey to grateful. David, thank you for taking the time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me to be a guest. I appreciate it.
Awesome. You know, we were talking before we got started and David said, what about my bio kind of wanted you to invite me on? And as I read his introduction, you know, there's a lot of personal coaches and mentors and such out there. Your story is unique, right? You were successful in a career, you were doing well, and then you just kind of took a different rail, right? Went on a different track. Maybe you could talk to us just a little bit about that story and what caused you to make a change when you were, by all outward appearances, doing well in your previous career.
Well, I think I should start by clarifying. I didn't actually take a second rail. Like I just added a rail, right? Because I still have my career. I'm still the director of training of a big company. I travel and I do a lot of that. But what I discovered several years ago was that making it my sole focus was having a negative impact on my life as a whole, on my relationships with my family. And to this day, I still struggle with it, right? Like the book is all about this journey that I went on to improve myself, to improve my relationships. But, you know, I mean, you're actually catching me on a rough day. I had some of those same struggles today that I had so many years ago. It's an ongoing process. But generally speaking, I guess if you were to put my book in a library, do those still exist? I think those still exist, right?
Yeah, they do.
It would be under the self-help genre. But what I've been told by readers is that it isn't preachy like a lot of self-help books. It doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't tell you how to change the reader. It simply tells the story of how I chose to and how it had a positive impact on my life. And people seem to resonate with this professional who was successful in his career, and that resulted in not so successful relationships at home, and how I made an effort to try and get everything aligned so that I was successful in both areas of my life.
I love it. I do a lot of mentoring and some would say life coaching just for folks that have gotten to know me on the side. And I enjoy doing it and helping, you know, where I can. One of the things that we use is a life wheel. Right. And it's use 8 or 9 different measurements of your life, career being one, spouse or relations being another, friends, finances. Right. And you kind of grade everything. And what you're trying to get to is kind of what you described. Right. If they're all out of balance, the wheel doesn't roll really well. Think of it on a wagon. Right. You get this big clunk, 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 or it doesn't move at all. Right. Which is the worst case scenario and usually where you have some pretty big problems. But the more you can even that out, and sometimes that means pulling something that's really successful and maxed out, pulling it back a little bit, right? To be in alignment with some of these other variables of everyone's life so that you get a less clunky, hopefully smooth and round, everything kind of working in harmony. And that sounds like the journey that you went on.
Yeah, if you were to look at my wheel prior to my journey, it would have been very lopsided and very flat on one side. And today it's not round for sure, but it's closer. I think that the wheel would turn. I love this. I love that there are so many life coaches out there. I always thought, man, that'd be such a fun job to be a life coach. Like no one said that was a thing I could be when I was 8 years old. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Life coach? That's a choice. I would have been like, that sounds like fun. But I never felt, and to this day, I don't feel qualified to be a life coach, right? Like, who am I to give advice? I'm just some schmuck who had a hard time, and I journaled my activity over the course of about 8 months. And at the end of the 8 months, there's a pretty significant difference in the person that started the story. But
wow,
even the last chapter talks about how I screw up again. And instead of you getting this big happy ending, you get this, man, he still has to keep working at it ending.
You know what I love about a lot of my guests that have, that share their story and share their journey. And it's one of continuous struggle or success or tinkering. It's not, they share the struggle versus you would think they'd only want to be like, look at me, look how successful I am. And instead, with such humility, right, they come out and they share their journey. And it's just, I think you're bred when you're younger, right? This is a fathering thing for those of you that know me, right? I have 5 kids and I struggle to be a good dad to all of them, and they're all different. And it's a struggle every day that it's the most important job I have. But, teaching that, like, it's okay to be in touch emotionally. It's okay to struggle. And you don't have to be the strong, macho, unemotional. It's okay to share your struggles, right? That's an okay thing. And here you are telling your story and then putting it in a book so that others can benefit from it. And to me, that's just, humility personified.
Honestly, I think if you were to ask my children, to describe me, one of the words they would probably use would be needy. Honestly, dad's feeling needy again. He needs to be told he's appreciated. Like that's not something I'm proud of, but that's the kind of thing that went into the book. Like I laid it all out there. Some of my friends would read my book and go, "I can't believe you published that." But then a lot of other readers are like, "Wow, I'm exactly like that. I thought it was my dirty little secret that I was feeling these feelings, but you just put it all out there." So people seem to resonate with that.
Awesome. So why put it in a book, right? Why and talk about it, right? Why podcast about it? Why talk about it? Like, what is it to benefit the others? Is it part of just your journey? Does it help to express it? What were kind of some of your reasons for doing it?
Well, first of all, I think I wrote down my journey because writing it down was a good way of analyzing what was happening. And maybe I should back up a little bit. The book came about because I was having a hard time with my relationships. I traveled a lot. My Marriott app says I've spent 365 plus days in Marriotts over the last 5 years. So I was traveling a lot, and I had a short temper. I have a short temper, and I'm really picky. I'm a little OCD about things, and I really want things my way. And when I don't get them that way, I feel disrespected. I've asked you 17 times to turn off your lights. And it's not just that you left the lights on. It's that you said you would turn them off and you're not, right? Like that just got to me. Mm-hmm. But it was how I reacted to that was a little bit immature. And one day I was leaving to go on one of these trips, and I think my family was happy I was leaving. Wow. Like no dad wants to feel that way, right?
Right.
And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when I get on a plane, I start thinking about my mortality every time, right? And I had the thought, man, they'll be happier if I just don't come home.
Wow.
That's how dark a place I was in. And I said, oh, I got to fix this. And the way I chose to fix it was to read self-improvement books every single day, because they had helped me with my career. They had helped me with my sales career, my training career. And I thought, okay, well, they can help me as a person too. So I was reading books about how to get along better with my spouse, how to be a better dad. I've got all sorts of great books in my library on how to be a good dad. And so I would read the book, I would grab a lesson from the book, and then I would implement it in my life. And then the story behind that would become a chapter in my book. So that's all my book is here's how I screwed up. Here's the book I read. Here's the lesson I learned. And here's how I improved over time. So that is my own journey. And then to decide to publish it, I don't know what really inspired me to do that. I guess I was kind of hoping that it would help people, that it would lead to maybe some speaking engagements where I could go tell this story and help others embrace the power of self-improvement books, help them balance their career with their family life. So I guess I just wanted to take what I learned and share it with the world. So didn't really set out to write that as a book, but that's what it became.
That's awesome. So reading all these self-help books, right? And, they, even if you pick up one tidbit from these books, sometimes I'll read a whole book and I'll be like, okay, that was a little much, but there's one thing I'm going to try to take from that, right? What would you say the most valuable lesson that you've learned or gotten from all this content that you've consumed? What's one thing that's just like really stuck with you?
Yeah, there were so many. Most of them are about putting other people first and seeing things from their point of view. But the one that was most effective for me and the most important thing I needed to learn was don't sweat the small stuff. Right? Like, okay, so somebody didn't put their dish in the dishwasher. It's been sitting there for 2 days. I've asked 3 times. I'm feeling disrespected. But take a deep breath. At the end of the day, it's just a dish, And like I said, I still struggle with that. I've thought very long and hard about getting "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff" tattooed on the inside of my arm as a reminder. But during the course of my journey, that was like my motto. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Because most of the things that you stress about aren't really going to matter a year from now or 2 years from now. So what's the point?
I love it. I think, being around a lot of folks that struggle with anxiety, right? And they get all kinds of spun up from all kinds of small stuff, to your point. And I'm just like, why do you do that to yourself? Like, somebody who doesn't do that, I don't understand it. I sympathize with it, right? Because I'm like, wow, I'd really like you to just relax and enjoy life, right? Just enjoy the moment and the stuff that's happening. And sure, there's a dish over there, but there's so much other amazing things that you could observe, right? A child at play, a dog just being peaceful, or, so many things in our house happen, but then others in our house, and I'm purposely not naming her, right? Because I'll suffer the wrath tonight when I get home. But, we'll be like amped on this one thing. And I'm like, move on, right? Just let that go. Because it's not a priority to me. So I'm not going to immediately take action on it. Although maybe I should. To your point about putting others first, maybe I should be like, wow, that's really giving her stress, and I should take some action to try to relieve that stress. That's a great lesson, that I'm learning. But some of that I just don't understand.
I think we come from a place where we really focus on the negative. You see the negative. You can have 10 people say nice things to you throughout the day, and you're like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. One person says something mean. You go home. That's what you think about, right?
Yeah.
You'll get a kick out of this. I had a list of things that travelers do that annoy me. Just a list. Putting two items in the overhead bin.
Oh, that pisses me off too.
I know these things really trigger us, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not, I'm in the middle seat. I get the armrests. Okay. You got the window, you got the aisle. I get the armrests. Give me some space. Right. Or Don't eat Funyuns or corn nuts on a plane. Like, just, I
Please.
had this long list of like 18 items of things people do that irritate me on planes. Meanwhile, what I should have been doing was relaxing, enjoying a movie, opening the window, checking out the beautiful view, meeting new people. But for whatever reason, my head was in this space where I just focused on the negative. And the funny thing about reading every day, it's a little like diet and exercise, right? If you eat Taco Bell and drink Mountain Dew, you're going to feel like a sloth. It's going to affect your physically. You're going to feel worse. Well, if all you do is watch garbage television and stupid movies and TikTok all day, and you just consume all this blah, you're going to feel that way. But
Yeah.
the minute you commit to reading something like The School of Greatness, right, and you're hearing all these people's stories, anything by Mel Robbins, I freaking adore that woman. She's so smart and has helped me so much. But you go into the world with this more positive look because you have primed your brain to look for these things. And to this day, my son, he'll be like, "You're in a bad mood. Like, why are you in a bad mood?" I'm like, "I'm just no." He'll be like, "When was the last time you read, Dad?" I'm like, "Okay, you're right. I need to pick up a book again. I need to get on the treadmill of my brain, if you will, and just it helps."
That's so awesome. Those of us that fly, you mentioned Marriott, right? I'm a lifetime platinum member at Marriott. So I probably spent many nights like you away from my family, away from friends. And for those of you that don't travel, right, and you think, oh, these guys get to travel, that's awesome. It's awesome for like the first 6 months. And then it becomes very different. You stop getting invited to things by your friends because you're simply just never home. So they don't invite you to a bowling league on Thursday nights because you're not home on Thursday nights. They don't invite you over during the week. There's no Taco Tuesdays because you're in a different city, right? It does wear on business travelers, and it changes our mindset. We want to just, flying is not a pleasurable experience, right? We want to get on the plane, sit down, shut up, put your stuff away, and let's get going. And then you get these families, and they're so excited. It's their first time traveling, and they get on, and they're standing in the aisles, and they're talking about who gets the window in the aisle. And we're standing there going, who cares? Sit down, So I love to have a kindred soul there about the frustrations of flying. And then I remind myself, I'm like sitting in a dining room chair equivalent, flying at 30,000 feet through the air. And I marvel at just the miracle of flight, right? And I'm just so amazed that, maybe we had a rough landing, or maybe, we got delayed or whatever. I'm sorry, you're in a dining room chair flying at 500 miles an hour at 30,000 square feet. Be amazed, right? Because that's still an amazing marvel of aviation. But I just loved, sometimes we need to catch ourselves and be like, wow, yeah, okay, I need to get myself kind of regrouped here.
I actually had a little bit of a moment like that this week. I agreed to go to Buffalo, New York in February to meet with some clients, right? And it's a long way to Buffalo from Kansas City. I went through Chicago. It was really cold there, but I wasn't on a Zoom. I was actually shaking hands with people. They were like in person, and it was like so great to get to experience this. So you have to be thankful that air travel exists to allow you to have this career where you can travel all over the country and meet people. Coming home was a different story. Would you believe they flew me from Buffalo to Fort Lauderdale and then to Kansas City? It took me 9.5, 10 hours or something like that with all the travel to get home yesterday. And I was pretty destroyed by the time I got home. So it was a little harder to say, oh, I'm so grateful for airplanes that allow me to have this cool career after just traveling from like 5 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night.
I love it. You mentioned an author. Who inspires you? Who's like some folks that you're like, wow, if I could meet this one person, deceased or not, and just spend some time with them, who would that person be?
My all-time favorite author is Og Mandino, author of The Greatest Salesman in the World. But that's not my favorite book of his. It's actually The Greatest Miracle in the World. And ironically, the concept of the book is that that God has not left us alone. He speaks to us not through the prophets that existed in the stories of the Bibles, but rather through authors. There's a character in the book who refers to some of these powerful books as hand of God's work, right? And that is the book that truly got me on the path to reading self-help, self-improvement books, things that would grow me as a person. Og's long gone, but everything he ever wrote is brilliant. I've actually got another book half written in the style of Og Mandino. I would love to finish that one day. But yeah, Og is fantastic. And then authors who are alive, my absolute favorite has to be Mel Robbins. I mentioned her a minute ago, but she wrote a book called The 5-Second Rule. And here's the funny thing is, like, the first half of the book, I did not like her. I thought she was abrasive and a little arrogant. And honestly, I thought her 5-second rule was a little bit cliche and kind of it just felt forced. Like that's not really going to work.
Right.
But I don't like to start a book and not finish it, that OCD part of me. And now I've read everything she's ever written, and she gets better and better every time. And she's my favorite in the whole world. I just adore her.
That's awesome. Those of us that are older, right, as we mature and have families and such, and encounter all these struggles, oftentimes we look back and go, man, I wish I woulda. It would have been great if I knew. What would you like, if you could go back to your 10-year-old self, what would be some advice that you'd want to make sure that you knew back then?
The first thing I would say to my 10-year-old self is enjoy your hair while you have it.
That's awesome.
I miss hair. I had the most beautiful Scott Baio feathered mullet back in the 80s.
That's awesome.
I think I've actually asked myself this, and the answer may surprise you. It really doesn't have anything to do with my career or self-improvement or any of the things we've already talked about. It would actually be, don't stress about money. Like, there are going to be moments when you're broke. There are going to be a lot of moments when you're broke. I claimed bankruptcy in my mid-20s right after I'd gotten married. It was a really tough time. But there's always money. There's always going to be money. You're always going to make your rent. You're always going to have enough to pay your bills. Maybe they'll be a little bit late. You're always going to have enough for food. And one day you're going to have beautiful cars, a beautiful home. You're going to have money in savings. I just wish, and the irony, the real irony, Michael, is to this day, I still stress about money. Like, I know I shouldn't, but I wish I could just go back and say, hey, don't worry about the money thing. It's all going to work out. There's always going to be enough money. Just focus on things that are more important than that. So that would be the advice I would give my younger self.
I love it. You shared, which again is awesome, just your journey, your anxiety and such. What advice would you give people that have that similar struggle? We talked about don't sweat the small stuff, but are there tips or things that you've learned as a coping mechanism to help you that maybe you could share that help other folks?
It really just comes down to what I believe is that reading regularly is as important as eating good and exercising. I don't think people read enough. If I could get the whole world to commit to reading 15 minutes a day from something positive, I think it could change the entire world. The problem with that advice, Michael, is it's just so simple. It doesn't sound like it would actually work. Like I have a friend who is always negative, always struggling, and I've recommended book after book after book and never picks them up. But if I know if he went on the same journey that I did, it would change his life tenfold. I absolutely believe in the power of reading. My kids will tell you it's the one thing that I force on them to this day. My son's 21, my daughter's 16, and I'm constantly saying, please read. Please read 15, 20 minutes a day. I know you have a lot on your plates, but please do this. I want you to have this habit going into your life. I believe so strongly in reading something positive that's the whole goal of my book, is to get other people to keep reading.
I love it. You have a website. I want to switch our conversation and talk a little bit more about the internet marketing aspect of your life and technology and stuff. But I want to point out that there's the website, everydaylessonseveryday.com, where you can get the book that David's talking about. There's a children's book. Talk to me a little bit about the children's book.
Now you're gonna get me excited, because I love talking about my children's book.
It just seems like paradoxical, right? Like, here you are sharing your story, talking about your journey. These are adult things, right? Stress, anxiety, how you deal with them. And then there's a children's book. It's like, it just seems kind of opposite end of the spectrum. So let's talk.
Well, I never had a plan to write a children's book, but I've been a Jeep guy my whole life, been driving Jeeps since I was 16, but never truly took them off road until recently. Met a guy, he said, come on out to Moab, Utah with us, and we'll go. And the first day I was there, we went up this thing called the Entrance to Hell's Revenge. And the best way to imagine it is take a Hot Wheel and drive it up the back of a dinosaur toy. That's kind of what it was like. It was like a 70, 80 foot drop on the right, 70, 80 foot drop on the left. Crooked as all get out. That's a very Kansas thing to say. A very crooked driving, And I had an honest to God panic attack. I put the car in park because I thought I was going to pass out. I was breathing heavy. I was losing feeling in my lips and my face and my hands.
Wow.
Anyway, long story short, my friends helped me overcome that fear. And I used one of Mel Robbins' strategies, which I'll tell you about here in a second. And I got past that and had a ball. The whole week we just spent in Moab, like in the mountains, in the desert. It was great. When I got home, I was telling people that story, and somebody said, well, that sounds a little like The Little Engine That Could. And I was like, hey, this could be a children's book. And so I decided to storyboard it. I made some terrible PowerPoint with lots of clip art and stuff. And I would take pictures of Hot Wheels and stuff to kind of storyboard it. And then I found an artist who did the artwork for me. And so it's called DJ's Off-Road Adventures. DJ Faces His Fear. And the whole story is about this little blue truck overcoming his fears. And it's the first of there's 2 out, and I'm working on a third one. But just like Everyday Lessons, they all encompass a life lesson. The first one is about facing your fear. The second one's about working as a team. The one I'm working on now is about bullies and overcoming bullies. And so let me just tell you a real quick Mel Robbins strategy for overcoming fear and anxiety.
Sure.
And it's basically this. When you're really afraid of something, or if you're feeling really anxious about something, your body exhibits certain physical symptoms, the heavy breathing, the increased heart rate. Maybe it's a sweaty palms or whatever it is. Those are almost identical to the feelings that you get when you're excited about something. It's almost identical, right?
Yeah.
So if you can just switch something in your brain that says, this isn't fear, this is excitement, you can trick yourself into overcoming the fear to embrace the excitement. And that's what I tried to do in Moab. And that's what my character tries to explain in very simplistic terms that, elementary school kids can understand.
And I want to point out, it's not just like, oh, he wrote a book, right? He's got a Mom's Choice Award on that book, which doesn't come easily. You got to write about something kind of meaningful to child development to get something like that. I'm a recovering Jeep addict. I've had several Wranglers over my life and spent way too much damn money on them. And now I have a 4Runner that I am in love with and spending way too much damn money on. And I'm not going to Moab. A lot of my friends from Phoenix are going to Moab. And we do runs out here quite a bit. And I've always looked at that and I've always thought, I don't know, like I enjoy going out with my family and my wife enjoys it, but she has zero desire, nor do I have really any desire, more from a cost perspective of destroying my Forerunner out on some of these technical, terrain courses. But you see some of these Jeeps, man, and they're articulating and they're purposely like driving into 5 feet of mud, getting themselves stuck. And they're like, we're stuck. Now we're going to work to get out. And I'm like, how about you don't get yourself stuck? Then you don't have a problem. Like, why
Didn't
would
you
you
ever play
drive
in the
into
mud
that?
as a kid?
I did, but not in a $100,000 Wrangler, you know?
Honestly, people think I'm absolutely nuts. I have a 2018 Wrangler and I put a lot of money into it and I will take it into those exact places you just described.
It's awesome.
There's all sorts of videos of on my Instagram of us just going through mud and it's all Jeep content. So it's a lot of fun.
That's very cool. Yeah, we could probably have a whole podcast about off-roading adventures and such. And people are like, I went from a Porsche, right? I had a Porsche Panamera, which I loved. And people ask me, they're like, oh, you must be miserable in your Forerunner. I'm like, I love my Forerunner as much in a very different way as I love my Porsche. And it's just very different, right? And I love the fact that I can go places that people with a regular car will never see. They'll never see it. They'll never get there. They'll never have that experience. And it's just awesome. There's so many cool places that are just off the beaten path, literally. And people in that community, much like any other community, whether you're a motorcycle rider or whatever, when you find a community of people with like interests, it's so amazing how when you guys all come together, right? Everybody is like, oh my gosh. And they're just interested in what you did to your rig and where you've been, and everybody tells stories. And it's just such a great sense of community. But I digress looking at this cool book. But
well, I'm going to bring it back around because one of the lessons I learned on my journey was the importance of men having male friendships and women having female friendships, right? You spend so much time with your career, your kids, your spouse. Sometimes you blow off your male friends, right? Mm-hmm. And I found that in the Jeep community. I found men and women too, but I found my brothers, if you will, to go out into the mountains and spend a few days. And it was just really, really important to my personal growth too.
I love it. Yeah. We enjoy it every time we do it. We don't do it enough. And it's just a great reminder. So I want to pivot just briefly and talk to me a little bit about the internet marketing aspect and what's going on there.
Well, I talk a little bit about my career, right? Well, it started way back in the day when there were yellow pages. I used to sell print yellow pages. And of course, print yellow pages was the first of all the traditional medias to just get hammered by the internet. And so as soon as Google came along to replace yellow pages, a lot of people were like struggled with that. I embraced it. I was really lucky enough to be with a company that sent me to Mountain View, California, to the Googleplex. I could spend a week there learning about Google AdWords and how to not only how to use it, but how to train it. So I was a certified Google AdWords trainer. So I came back and my job was to get all these print yellow pages reps to embrace digital media, which very few of them did. So I quickly left and went to some pure digital companies. And today I am the national trainer for a company that basically, those ads that are they know a little too much about you. You know the ones I'm talking about? Like, hey, how'd you know I need a hearing aid? I did some research on tinnitus yesterday. Okay, I kind of get it. So that's the world I live in, and that's the technology that I teach.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's exciting time because that same technology that shows really relevant ads to a good audience so that the advertiser is spending fewer dollars and wasting fewer ads, that same technology is coming to the world of connected TV. And that's not only good for advertisers, it's good for us as users too. So that when we're sitting down and we pull up our streaming television and we're watching our favorite show, now instead of getting a bunch of commercials for some weird prescription medicine that you can't pronounce, you don't even know what it fixes, you might actually start getting ads for things that are important to you. I'll probably see lots of ads for barbecue restaurants and Jeep parts and trips to Colorado. So that's a good user experience for me too.
Yeah. I think there's such a backlash about that. It's just crazy, right? People, and I get the overall big brother, people like, oh, you got to cover your webcams, and Microsoft was getting hit when they had the Microsoft Connects, and they're like, Microsoft is listening to what's going on in your house, and Alexa's listening, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm kind of like, man, if anyone wants to hear all the nonsense that goes on in my house, great. And to your point, if I get better presentation of ads, right? Because you're going to get them. You're not going to not get presented ads. That's how these companies stay in business. Your job as a consumer using Google and such is to be presented these, and if relevant, click on them. That's or don't use Google, right? Or live under the rock or something, right? Because otherwise these companies don't get funded and can't provide the service that you use. So I'd rather have things presented to me that are relevant, right? I've probably already researched it, bought it, or whatever. They tend to be a little bit behind. Like I'll research something for my son's. He has a Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk that he just got and he loves. And I was researching crossbars for his roof rack. And now we already bought them, researched them, bought them. And I'm, for days now, I'm getting all this Jeep accessory stuff. I'm like, I don't have a Jeep. My son does. Wrong person. So it's not dialed in 100% yet. But it is a lot better than it was 5 years ago.
It's getting so much better, so much better. I don't want to just brag about my company, but we tend to deliver our ads within about 2 days of when a person's behavior says they're interested in something. So that's kind of one of our claims to fame. But I think it's interesting that you have this attitude of kind of well, let them listen. Who cares, right? I almost wish I could go back in time and tell George Orwell, when you were writing 1984, you nailed it, but you missed a couple of things. Number one, the government's not going to put these devices in our home. We're going to buy them. We're going to pay for them, and we're going to voluntarily put them in our home. Number two, the government's not going to use them to manipulate us or spy on us, but corporations are going to use them to get more money from us, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And number three, the part George Orwell really wouldn't have believed is no one's going to care. That seems to be almost everyone's attitude, and not everyone, but when I do these presentations, I did one yesterday or 2 days ago for about 60 business owners. And most of them were like, so what? I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care if my computer is tracking me. I don't care if my GPS on my phone knows where I've been. It's who cares? If it's going to show me a great Italian restaurant because I've been to an Italian restaurant in the last week, that's good for me. Most people's attitude is, it's fine. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. It's good for my career. It's good for my business. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's good for us as a society. It's not for me to say. But I love that you have that same attitude. It's whatever. It's all good.
We had a guest on that talked about personal finances and how our personal finances are influenced, right, by technology and media and the ads, mostly online ads. And, he was like, it's not a bad thing. You just need to be aware, right? And just because it's presented on an ad, you should still ask yourself, can I afford it? Is it a need or a want? And you should make an intelligent decision about it, right? Make a good buying decision. Just as if you were in a mall and you were walking through the mall and there's all kinds of stores and you see a piece of clothing you like or whatever, right? You go through that same decision tree. Can I afford it? Should I buy it? Do I need it? Will my wife kill me if I come home, with $100 untucked shirt that perhaps I should have went to H&M and got the same thing for, a quarter of the price? It's those same decisions, right? And as we move into the future of technology and the metaverse, and we're going to move into this. Well, Elon Musk would rather put chips in us, but I think we're going to get to this metaverse first, where we're in this highly online oriented environment. Ads are going to be what funds it, and that doesn't make them bad. You just need to understand why they're there. And, again, for me, I'd rather have them be something I'm interested in than women's feminine hygiene products, which I honestly could give a flying flip about. So,
yeah. And me, every time I get a hair care product, I'm like, what a waste.
It's for the beard. It's for the beard.
No.
Well, awesome. So much, so much diversity. If you look at yourself as a person, you're an author. You're still working in a cool industry, right? Kind of on the cutting edge of tech. You've got the whole marketing and sales aspect, children's books, self-help, sharing your story. It's a cool swirl to put out there in the universe, and hopefully, somebody can listen to this and go, I got to check this guy out, because to me, there's just so many aspects and so many angles, right? Like, we literally could go off on a podcast about children's books, and we can go off on a podcast on self-help, and we can go off on a podcast for sure, or a series of podcasts on off-roading and geeking out on wrenching on Jeeps and such, or internet marketing, right? We've had a couple guests on internet marketing, and they do internet marketing. David does internet marketing as a career, but then also mixes in all this other kind of cool diversity. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing the tips that you shared. Thanks for approaching it all with such humility. Because you could be like, yeah, that's right, I'm a badass and I've got all this stuff out there. And that's very much not your style. So that is so cool.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being a guest on your show, and this your perception of me makes me feel very confident. I don't normally feel that way, so thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely. So again, you can get a good sense of what David's doing out at Everyday Lessons everyday.com. Link will be down below in the podcast description. And then the children's book can be found there, or also it has its own website at djsoffroadadventures.com. And there's 2 books out, third one on the way. David, again, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.